Ned Stark's "I'll just confront Cersei privately" plan. Ned Stark knew the truth about Joffrey's parentage and decided the smart move was to privately warn Cersei before doing anything about it, giving the person with everything to lose a head start to destroy him first. He had roughly 300 household guards in a city of thousands, no allied military force, and zero backup plan. Then, in what might be the single most catastrophic trust placement in Westerosi history, he handed control of the City Watch to Littlefinger, a man who had literally told him to trust no one. Cersei didn't flee. She used the warning to time her counterstrike perfectly, and within hours, Ned was kneeling on cold stone, with a blade at his throat, and golden Lannister armor flooding the throne room on all sides. The Ironborn invasion of the North, Theon Greyjoy, captured Winterfell with fewer than 30 men, which sounds impressive until you remember that a castle is only useful if you can actually hold it. He had no supply lines, no reinforcements coming, and a crew that openly resented him and obeyed reluctantly at best. When Bran and Rickon escaped, Theon's solution was to burn 2 random farm boys and display the charred bodies as a bluff, a lie that collapsed almost immediately. His entire plan assumed no one would ever come to take Winterfell back, which is a remarkable assumption about a castle belonging to the most powerful family in the North. His own men eventually knocked him unconscious, handed him to Rose Bolton's bastard, and burned Winterfell themselves. Theon achieved nothing except personally accelerating every bad thing that would happen to him for the next 3 seasons. Robb Stark's marriage decision as military strategy. Robb Stark needed the Frey Bridge crossing to move his army south, so he swore a formal oath to marry one of Walder Frey's daughters, which is the kind of promise you do not break to a man whose entire personality is holding grudges. He then married Talisa, a battlefield nurse with no political alliances, no armies, and no strategic value whatsoever. As a replacement offering, he volunteered his uncle Edmure without asking Edmure first, which went exactly as well as you'd expect. He never built alternative alliances to replace what he'd burned, never secured another river crossing, and never developed any contingency for Frey's inevitable fury, despite Walder Frey's reputation for pettiness being so legendary. It was common knowledge across Westeros. Robb was a genuinely talented battlefield commander who seemed to believe winning fights was a substitute for basic political arithmetic. The Red Wedding, having already destroyed his alliance with the Freys, Robb Stark then walked into their castle with minimal guards to attend a wedding at a location entirely controlled by his enemies, bringing his pregnant wife, his mother, and no meaningful military presence inside the walls. His only security was guest right, the sacred Westerosi tradition protecting guests from harm under a host's roof, which is a cultural norm, not an enforcement mechanism. He had no scouts inside the twins, no knowledge of the Bolton betrayal, no awareness of Lannister coordination behind the scenes, and Grey Wind, his direwolf, was kenneled separately outside. Roughly 3,500 northern troops were camped beyond the walls, close enough to hear what happened and too far to do anything about it. He handed his enemies every key target in a single room, and when the musicians behind the curtain began playing the Rains of Castamere, there was nothing left to do. Joffrey at the Battle of the Blackwater. Joffrey commanded the Battle of the Blackwater, despite having no military experience, and spent the engagement wandering the ramparts issuing useless orders while ignoring Tyrion and every competent general around him. The wildfire chain that destroyed Stannis' fleet, roughly 200 ships bearing down on King's Landing, was entirely Tyrion's plan. Joffrey contributed nothing to it. When the battle turned dangerous and Stannis' soldiers began scaling the walls, Joffrey retreated inside on his mother's request, abandoning his troops mid-combat in full view of everyone fighting for him. Cersei was so certain he would lose that she nearly poisoned Tommen on the Maegor's Holdfast steps to spare him capture. Victory arrived only because Tywin Lannister rode through the gates with a Tyrell alliance at his back, a development Joffrey had nothing to do with and immediately took full credit for. Stannis marching on Winterfell in a Blizzard Stannis Baratheon's northern campaign in Season 5 represents a masterclass in compounding catastrophic decisions. His army was already starving and freezing when he chose to march on Winterfell through the middle of a northern winter, rather than wait for conditions to improve. Overnight, hundreds of men deserted, taking horses and supplies with them. Then, on Melisandre's advice, he burned his daughter Shireen alive as a sacrifice to R'hllor, which caused his wife to hang herself before morning and his remaining cavalry to abandon him entirely. He arrived at Winterfell with a shattered, demoralized force on foot, facing Bolton cavalry on home terrain, with no siege equipment, no allies inside the castle, and no realistic path to any outcome except the one he got. Brienne of Tarth executed him shortly after in a forest clearing, and it was almost a mercy, the hold-the-door strategy. The escape from the Three-Eyed Raven's cave wasn't exactly a battle plan, but it was a catastrophic failure of preparation that got nearly everyone killed. Bran was allowed to remain inside a green sight vision, while the cave was actively being overrun by the Night King's army, forcing Mira to drag his unconscious body toward an exit with no fighters left standing. The entire escape relied on one man holding one door, with no secondary exit, no defensive fallback, and no coordination. Bran's accidental warging into young Wylis in the past simultaneously destroyed the boy's mind decades before it was needed, collapsing his consciousness into a single repeated phrase. The children of the forest died there. Summer the direwolf died there. The three-eyed raven died there. The door held for approximately 3 minutes. The White Hunt beyond the wall. Jon Snow's plan to capture a single living wight and transport it to King's Landing, to convince Cersei Lannister to pause her political scheming, is, start to finish, one of the most optimistic assessments of Cersei's character ever committed to screen. 7 people walked beyond the wall into an army of 100,000 undead with no extraction plan and sent a raven to Daenerys only after becoming stranded on a frozen lake. Daenerys flew all 3 dragons into the ambush to rescue them, losing Viserion to a Night King ice spear, which was then reanimated and used to destroy the wall entirely. The Wight was successfully delivered to the Dragon Pit Summit in Season 8, where Cersei pretended to agree to a truce, immediately betrayed everyone, and the whole exercise achieved absolutely nothing except handing the enemy a dragon. The Long Night Battle Plan. The Battle of Winterfell's military strategy has been analyzed, criticized, and mocked so thoroughly that it deserves its own entry in tactical history. The entire Dothraki cavalry, the offensive strike force, was sent charging into complete darkness against an enemy unkillable by conventional weapons, and their flaming araks went out in seconds like candles in a storm. The unsullied infantry was positioned in front of the castle walls with no retreat route, condemned to absorb casualties until they were overrun. The civilian shelter chosen was Winterfell's crypts, a chamber full of thousands of ancient dead in a battle against a necromancer who raises corpses. Dragons flew blind and uncoordinated for most of the fight. There were no staged defensive lines, no fallback positions, no depth to the strategy at all. Arya Stark killed the Night King in the Godswood, which was the plan of exactly no one in that command meeting. Daenerys forgetting about the Iron Fleet. Daenerys Targaryen arrived at Season 8 with 2 remaining dragons, total aerial superiority, and the ability to approach from any angle, altitude, or direction she chose, and she flew Rhaegal directly into a naval ambush at low altitude from the front. Euron's scorpion bolts had already demonstrated their range and accuracy in Season 7. Rhaegal was already wounded from the long night. 3 consecutive bolts hit him in broad daylight over calm open water before Daenerys made any evasive movement, and Rhaegal spiraled into the Blackwater Bay while she escaped on Drogon rather than immediately destroying the fleet and the scorpions that just killed her dragon. The showrunner's own behind-the-scenes commentary acknowledged she had simply forgotten the Iron Fleet was there. Missandei was captured in the aftermath and executed on the walls of King's Landing, and the phrase, "Daenerys forgot about the Iron Fleet," became the 8-word eulogy for the show's final season. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.